Hello friends, welcome back to this Go Agile series part 7. Last time we reviewed Kanban, which is one of the Agile frameworks. Today we will review Scrum, which is another popular Agile framework. So what is Scrum? In a previous episode we talked about the Scrummage in the rugby game, the new product development by Hirotaka and Ikujiro. You remember, right? So in early 90s, two gentlemen, Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland, they built a software development approach taking some of the original new product development principles of Hirotaka and Ikujiro, and they started calling it Scrum. So in 2001, Agile Manifesto came, and then slowly Scrum started becoming more and more popular. Scrum is again a lightweight framework which gives a lot of flexibility. At the same time, it's not too light like Kanban, and so it became almost the number one Agile framework in the last decade. So in short, Scrum is an Agile framework for developing, delivering, and sustaining complex products. So initially it was more focused in the software development, but then it expanded beyond software development and went into research, sales, marketing, and advanced technologies. I want to give a heads up that I'm not following the standard bookish type of format for Scrum. I'm changing it slightly because I feel this is a bit easier to understand Scrum, so please bear with me, but we'll try to cover most of it over a few episodes. In Scrum, broadly, there are 4 things we need to study or understand. 1. Scrum roles. 2. Scrum ceremonies. 3. Scrum artifacts. And 4. Scrum values. That completes the Scrum. Scrum roles is basically we're talking of what are the different characters, people, who involve in Scrum. The Scrum ceremonies is nothing but the meetings, all those different meetings that happen in a typical sprint. And then you have Scrum artifacts is the tangible deliverables, what we expect in a Scrum. And then you have Scrum values. So to summarize in Scrum, there are 3 roles, 4 ceremonies, 4 artifacts, and 4 values. I don't think we can cover all this in one session, so let's break it up and distribute across multiple sessions. Now let's begin with the Scrum roles and what do they do. Scrum Team. There is a major shift from traditional approach in Scrum. In traditional model, there is a PM or project manager who is very powerful and there's a lot of authority. The team just follows the instructions, no questions asked. There could be hierarchy also within the team. In fact, the team many times don't even know what they're really building and why they're doing, and what is the business stake, and what is the business impact, and so on. I'm saying on average, sometimes some members could be carrying higher responsibility and some lower, and there's dependency on few members who knows much more and deeper about the project than others. When it comes to Scrum, entire team owns it. Everyone is expected to know everything. They know the expectations, they know the vision, they know the impact, they know the risks. In short, they are very self-organized. So no spoon feeding. Nobody is going to call them for meetings. Nobody is going to remind them what tasks they need to complete. They just need to be very attentive and responsible for all of their actions. They collectively take the system forward. They all have equal responsibility. Clear, right? So in short, they are no longer managed, but they are self-organized. Now let's see the different roles of a typical Scrum team. Earlier in projects, we used to call project manager, business analysts, developers, testers, and so on, right? Now in Scrum team, it's fairly simple. There are only 3 types of roles. One is product owner, one is Scrum master, and then you have the developers. That's it. So let's review each one of them. Let's start with the Scrum master. The Scrum master knows all the rules of the game. They closely monitor any impediments. Impediments are nothing but blockers. Now to remove these impediments, you may have to coordinate with other teams, other departments like legal, finance, admin, etc. And someone has to coordinate with release management also, external business stakeholders. All this is handled by Scrum Masters. They are like the spokesperson for the team. Then they will facilitate any meetings required within the team or with other teams as required. Don't forget, teams should handle their duties by themselves though. Scrum Master is only a facilitator, and in other words called as servant master. They work to protect the team, make sure team has no impediments and work is moving smoothly. It doesn't mean Scrum Master is responsible, right? The entire team is responsible and they should follow all the requirements and expectations. There's no compromise. Then let's see the product owner. A product owner is responsible to gather all the business requirements. So it's their responsibility to coordinate with business stakeholders or product managers, and they have to make sure that they are aligned with enterprise-wide business objectives and requirements and know the exact business value of why a certain feature is being developed or necessary. They should prioritize the requirements. They maintain the backlog and so on. Backlog is nothing but again the complete list of all requirements that you keep adding, and it's an indefinite long list of items. So when team starts working on the development, PO or product owner should provide all guidance and answer any questions related to what the team is building. And the third role is developers. Of course, they are responsible to actually build the product. They should be clear about the requirements, understand it well, should be able to quickly do the necessary breakdown of stories into tasks and so on. As we continue, we are using number of new terms such as features, stories, tasks, product managers and so on. So we will discuss all of them again, so don't worry much about it right now. Nobody tells the developers to attend meetings in time or to keep moving the tasks. Ensure all stories are completed before the sprint ends. They should be very self-organized. If a Scrum Master is repeatedly pinging them to join daily stand-ups or sprint planning sessions, etc., that means they're not doing their work effectively. Coaching can happen only up to a certain extent, but it can be babysitting. There's a difference. So we saw the Scrum roles. Next, we will see what are these Scrum ceremonies. Scrum has 4 ceremonies. Basically, these are nothing but meetings. First time when you start learning, people think this is some big technical term and there's a definition and you got to understand. Nothing like that. It's just a set of meetings that we call Scrum ceremonies. There are 4 such meetings and collectively we call them Scrum ceremonies. Now, what are these 4 Scrum ceremonies? 1. Daily stand-up, or we also call it DSU. Daily, when you start the day, you begin with just a short 15-minute meeting. What do you do here? Each member shares what they have done so far, which is probably yesterday. And since you are meeting daily, so they convey what they have done yesterday, then convey what they are planning to do today, and then discuss if they are stuck with any bottlenecks, which we call impediments. Simple, right? I see in many places, they run these meetings for 30, 40 minutes and sometimes even an hour. But that's not an effective or efficient way. Once you run these for a month and get used to the Scrum ways, you should not need more than 15 minutes. And if there are some pointed discussions about an impediment or something else, they should have an offline meeting after the daily stand-up. But invariably, they engage all members for that 40 minutes or so, which you should avoid. And teams should have the self-discipline to make sure they join these meetings in time. There's a wrong notion that Scrum Master has to start this daily stand-up every day. No, that's wrong. Whether Scrum Master is there or not, the team should be responsible enough to start the DSU at the right time. Sprint planning. You will start every iteration with a planning session. It will be once in a sprint. So daily stand-up is daily, whereas sprint planning is once in a sprint. A sprint is roughly 2 weeks. Sprint planning is a bit more detailed, where the team goes through the backlog of stories. The product owner will be prioritizing the stories and will say, okay, these 7 stories, for example, are top priority. They should be done in this sprint. Then team goes through each of these 7 stories and try to understand the scope, ask any questions, get clarifications by the product owner, and then the team will do some sort of estimation of each story. Let's spend a minute on what these stories are. User stories are nothing but short, simple descriptions of a feature told from the perspective of the person who desires the new capability. That's normally a user or customer in the system. Generally, a simple template is followed. So you are building the software for some user or business, right? Just imagine if they explain how they visualize the functionality is nothing but your user story. That's why we call user stories. But more generally, we also call stories. So product owners should be well versed with writing user stories in such a way how a business visualizes and also something the team can easily follow. And of course, the product owner is there to answer any questions or clarifications if team has. There are 4 key elements of a sprint planning ceremony. Define the scope of the sprint. Basically, you will determine which tasks in the project backlog your team intends to tackle during the particular sprint that are available to work on them, and assess your team's current work capacity. That means you are factoring all the holidays, events, or days off. So every member should upfront inform if they are taking any offs or if any leaves during the sprint. So accordingly, the Scrum Master can do some sort of capacity planning. Then set goals for the sprint. Establish when these tasks are expected to be completed in your Scrum schedule, what constitutes completion, and any other metrics for success you deem necessary. There is something called definition of done. That means teams should plan to make sure all stories meet the done criteria to close them before the sprint ends. And we will be reviewing many of these things again, like the done criteria and all that stuff. So don't worry right now. For now, just imagine, like, let's focus on these ceremonies right now. Then address concerns. Open the floor up to your team to discuss any roadblocks, issues, or potential scheduling issues that might affect the delivery of any backlog items. So, to a large extent, this is what you do in a typical sprint planning meeting. So, sprint planning meetings are slightly longer. They can go from 2 to 4 hours for each sprint. But then, during the sprint planning, the team should also be able to break down the stories, each story into tasks. And we'll cover that in detail maybe later. So next we'll go to sprint review. That's the third ceremony. So just like we begin a sprint with sprint planning, we also hold a sprint review at the end of the sprint. What we do here is we review the work product, whatever was developed so far, meaning we will inspect the increment and make sure the product is meeting the expectations. We invite business stakeholders also to be present at this meeting. They provide any feedback and any improvements, so we can adapt to those as we move on to next sprint, and we adjust the backlog also accordingly. So during sprint review, if any new changes are suggested or if any were suggested to be dropped, then product owner will note down and accordingly adjust the product backlog. So in the next sprint, when you go for sprint planning, you have the right stories to proceed further. And here we are not reviewing some documentation in the sprint review, but it's more of demonstrating the actual tangible product that's been developed so far. And the last Scrum ceremony is the Scrum retrospective. Scrum retrospective is the scenario where the Scrum members come together to do an appraisal of their work. It's a self-inspection on how they are executing their tasks. Things like what went right, what went wrong, what can be improved, what needs to be stopped. And so these sort of things will be discussed, and it will help the team to become more productive as they move forward. So those are the 4 Scrum ceremonies. So now we completed Scrum roles, and then we completed Scrum ceremonies. Okay, I think this is good for your first session of Scrum. There are so many other things to cover, and we will try to catch up with some of the other stuff in the upcoming sessions. So with that, we'll conclude this Go Agile 7, and till we meet again in Go Agile 8, keep practicing Agile. Stay safe and do good. See you.